Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Threats podcast by Bleckmann. As always, I am your host, Erik Janssen Steenberg, and also today we will be looking into what is developing and what are the trends in fashion and lifestyle, supply chain management and fulfillment. And today we're going to explore circular economy models and their role within today's economic landscape. And for that, I am joined today by Nicole Bassett, circularity lead at Bleckmann. Nicole, you spent lots of time looking at microeconomic trends and how circular business model fit within those trends. And I'm just happy to have you. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Erik.
Absolutely. And of course, you, the viewer, the listener, will have already realized Nicole has been here before. So yeah, we're proud to have her back as the go-to person for the questions that we have listed. Nicole, for the people that haven't had the pleasure yet, could you please briefly introduce yourself and help us understand the current economic landscape that we're all seeing on a day-to-day basis, and how we got here and what it means for businesses navigating circularity.
Certainly. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've been working at this intersection between business and sustainability for about 20 years. And so I've always been fascinated by the relationship economics has with the ecosystem and society that it relies on. And so, yes, to talk about the current economic state, it's helpful to think about how did we get here? Because economics is not new. If you think about economics, it's the system in which goods and services are produced and distributed and consumed by a society. So that's been going on since there were humans. And I'd say it got more refined and sort of became a vocabulary around ancient Greece. So ancient Greece was a while ago, so you can imagine things have really evolved since then. And in that evolution, as people are talking about, well, what's happening in the world? What's happening with trade? We need to have different metrics to measure its health. And so I think most people will have heard of the most famous economic metric, which is gross domestic product, GDP. So it's how a country measures its own output. And it became the dominant metric only in the 1950s, which is a long time ago, but it's not that long ago.
No.
And its creator, economist Simon Kuznets, really warned us that this is one metric. This is not measuring all of well-being. And so we've added a few other metrics when we talk about the economy, maybe inflation rates or employment statistics or consumer sentiment. But they are really only part of a story, because you can imagine the words that I just said are very financial focused.
Yeah.
And they fail to account for everything else that has value that we need to live. So clean air or clean water or mental or physical health or social equity. So those things have been called externalities. So traditional economists will think of those things as sitting outside of the financial world. And they've been left out of traditional economic models, even though, as you can imagine, they are incredibly important. So as a result, what we're seeing now, and we have seen for a while, is forward-thinking businesses and economists who are exploring alternative models that integrate economic prosperity with planetary and social well-being.
Yeah. Which is actually fascinating, because what you're saying is that the models that, the general public does know, actually, they don't work, they don't match with circularity, and so we're omitting the components of our economics that should be most important to us, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but. So you're talking about alternative models. So what are they, and how do they allow for circularity to play a role in those models?
Yeah. So exactly what you just said. It's sort of like a little bit like obvious but surprising when we talk about like, well, why aren't we measuring ecosystem health or clean air or clean water or, why? And when I grew up and started this work, we would say things like people, planet, profit.
Yeah.
And they were like as if they were these three separate buckets. And so I want people to think about it as you don't get to have an economy if you don't have a society that creates an economy, and you don't have a society if you don't have a living planet. So you should think of this more as a system.
A trinity.
And so that's what we're seeing right now is more economists and practitioners are really advocating for this systems thinking, a holistic approach to economics that considers this interconnectedness. And one such framework that I really like is Donut Economics by Kate Raworth, who really balances this idea. And so her model is, no surprise, a donut. So you have, you can imagine this outer circle, which says, hey, we have to do business and operate our lives within these planetary boundaries. Because if we get outside of those boundaries, then we're going to cause, incredible damage to the planet. And we can't get past that. Then on the inner circle, what we're saying is, hey, we need a thriving society in order to have a functioning economy. And so we've got to make sure people have access to food and water and clean air and clean water and those sorts of things. So then her model is, so let's figure out how to do business inside of the donut. And similarly, the circular economy approach is taking this idea that we move away from this traditional, I take raw materials, I make things, I sell them, and then they go in the garbage at the end of their use. And instead, we're designing products and services with longevity, reuse, regeneration. And we're really thinking about how do we create a business that is there's no end of the line, but we're actually really trying to bring back things and create a lot of resource efficiency in that process. And so businesses that are starting to adopt these ways of thinking are going to be really well positioned in this future economy.
Yeah. It sounds like we're becoming, or at least some of us are becoming more aware. Yeah. So first you need to know before you can act and improve, so to speak. Okay, but looking at today's rather volatile geopolitical developments, why would now be the right time to invest for businesses in circular or circularity focused models?
Yeah, I kind of come back to this, there's just a reality that we have to consider. I'm stealing from Al Gore. I love the term. It's an inconvenient truth. We don't like that the reality is what it is.
No.
But you could think if you're a business leader, just even if you're doing you don't care and you're doing strategic planning for your company, you know that the economy of the future will not be the same as the one today.
Correct.
And you are not going to be able to rely on the same resources.
Not at all.
There is a reason that we can do business today, and that's because of the conditions of the earth today. So you think there's a reason we can use cotton inside of our clothes because we have the conditions in which to grow them. So, and then there's just these different conditions that allow a boat to be able to come from, China to Amsterdam, and we able to do trade and grow businesses because we kind of have a sense of how the world is. Mm-hmm. But that really is at risk. The hottest 10 years that we've had have been the last 10 years on this planet, which is why a lot of alarm bells around climate change are going off. We've also been experiencing incredible biodiversity loss, about estimated 27,000 species a year are going extinct. And so that's really starting to affect the ecosystem in which business relies on. So as companies think about the future, they're like, okay, these very real scientific changes are occurring, whether we want them to or not. And so how do I design my business and my products and my supply chains for that future state? And And business leaders are not alone. There's a lot of consumers who are starting to raise their hand and saying, I don't want to be complicit in the problem. I want to buy from companies who are doing the right thing. I want to spend my dollars where I think I can be doing good.
Yep.
And so companies are starting to respond to that consumer base, or those consumers are starting businesses, which is also really cool. And then there is still regulation that's pushing this along. Europe definitely has some very progressive laws around circularity. And there are a number of states in the US who have taken it upon themselves to look at, okay, how do we promote circular business models and do things like extended producer responsibility or carbon accounting.
This is that green wave that we talked about previously. So in terms of legislation, people waking up and saying, I want to be part of the solution, not the problem anymore. That's the change that you mentioned previously. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so those are just the things that, they may not be the dominant culture today, but they exist and they are pushing things along in this direction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being with us today. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have, but there's going to be a part 2. So stay tuned for the next episode of Beyond Threats by Bleckmann. See you soon.